Hello, testing. Great. My name is Charlie Wilson. As Deanna said, Deanna's the course leader of MA Cities. It feels weird to be at a graduate showcase and I haven't finished yet, but I'll be talking you guys through, hopefully in 15-20 minutes, what I've done in about 2 years, so wish me luck. This is an idea that I've been playing around with called RUE, short for Radical Urban Entrepreneurialism. I'll get into it, but I think a really nice place to start is sort of share a little bit of my sort of positionality and background and what's influencing me and my creative practice and who I am. That's always a nice place to start. So the question, I suppose, is what is the connection between a wheelchair and a skateboard? That is not a joke. They're the two main consistencies in my life. So my mother has cerebral palsy, so is a full-time wheelchair user, and I also grew up skateboarding as well. And there's a really interesting duality between that, because on one side I saw city architecture, infrastructure often work against my mum in a lot of ways. But then on the other side of things, through skateboarding, I explored new physicalities of the city and playfulness and adventure in cities. And those two things together, I think, has shaped me into someone that has quite an intimate relationship with the built world, and has very much shaped my practice, my research, which is why I'm here at MA Cities, and also radical urban entrepreneurialism. So it's more interesting than just a bunch of fancy words. It actually does mean something. So radical urban entrepreneurialism, or RUE for short, is a conceptual framework and platform in development that aims to revolutionize the way that urban interventions are designed, built, and financed. It's also the basis for my thesis, due at the end of the year. Wish me luck. Due when? Great. Even less time, Deanna. Thank you so much. It empowers community stakeholders to actively participate in shaping their cities according to their own visions and aspirations. RUE envisions a future where emerging technologies and innovative financing converge within a unified platform, amplifying the creative potential of citizens and fostering collaborative decision-making processes. Through the seamless integration, and take note of these 4 things: AI design tools, blockchain smart contracts, crowdfunding, and innovative financing models, RUE empowers individuals to contribute their ideas, expertise, and resources to the urban development landscape, turning vacant space into civic assets. Let me dive into that a little bit more. So the incorporation of AI design tools driven by text-to-image and voice-to-image, to give you guys a bit of an understanding of what that is. I don't know whether you guys have used ChatGPT or DALL-E 2. You can basically type in anything that you want to see, and the AI will generate an image based on what you type in. And voice-to-image AI is a new tech, basically this year, where you can voice in what you want to see, and AI will generate an image of that, of what you've just described. What's really exciting about that is it has the potential to enable community members to translate their visions into visually stunning and architecturally sound renders. So by bridging the gap between imagination and implementation, RUE democratizes the design process, making it accessible to individuals with diverse backgrounds and expertise. If, like me, you really struggle with design work, this is going to be a lifesaver. In parallel, the use of blockchain smart contracts ensures transparency, efficiency, and trust in the implementation of urban interventions. These secure and immutable contracts facilitate seamless transactions and agreements between stakeholders. So in the context of the RUE ecosystem, these stakeholders will be the community members, you and I. That will be urban practitioners, that will be landowners and policymakers. Typically in the sort of typical design build process, there's a lot of risk and burden on different stakeholders, especially in terms of who has ownership, the risk perception of maintenance, whereas with blockchain smart contracts, they're immutable. And in a way, it actually empowers the community member more because no one's in charge, everyone's in charge. Guaranteeing, in this case, a fair allocation of resources and fostering a sense of transparency and accountability. Now, the second two features, crowdfunding and innovative financing, diving into these two features a little bit more. So RUE will embrace the power of crowdfunding, empowering communities to take ownership of the financing process and shaping the priorities of urban interventions. By providing a direct means for neighbours and community members to contribute financially, RUE circumvents traditional external financing mechanisms and fosters a sense of collective responsibility and investment in the built environment. To enhance the financial viability of this, because one of the challenges that I came up against is this idea of, well, is it the community's responsibility to raise all the funds for all the cool stuff that they're going to build on their city and their street? No. So what RUE wants to do is create a RUE fund, which basically attracts public and private investment from things like green bonds, social bonds, mini municipality bonds, basically huge pots of money that are dedicated to community engagement, community-led initiatives, but they don't have access to the community or the initiatives that they want to raise. So RUE will create a RUE fund that will basically support all the crowdfunding activities by neighbours. So let's say you reach 60% of your budget needed, RUE will help you with the rest. Through the integration of all of those things, so AI, blockchain, crowdfunding, and innovative financing, RUE hopes to pave the way for a new era of civic-led urban interventions. It challenges conventional top-down approaches and embraces a bottom-up perspective where city-making is led by the imagination and aspirations of its inhabitants. RUE will ultimately aim to create an experimental liminal space where islands of coherence can demonstrate new forms of radical and innovative city-making. Sounds pretty cool to me. That's why I'm doing it. Next slide. So diving into the sort of words here, I think it's really nice to dive into descriptions. We had Rosanna from Urban Lexicon early on in the year, and they really shaped the way that I look at work and the use of words and the power of words and how that actually shapes spatial practice. So RUE is radical. It aims to use emerging technologies to advocate far-reaching and fundamental change rooted in unlocking the design-build capacity of communities. RUE is urban. It will be rooted in collaborative urban interventions and city transformation at the neighbourhood scale. And of course, RUE aims to be entrepreneurial. So it pursues new innovation opportunities rooted in redefining value creation to include collective social and ecological outcomes, not just economic. When people hear entrepreneurial, they think, oh my God, capitalism, neoliberalism. I think with this type of work and research and all the amazing things that MA Cities are doing, it's an opportunity to begin to redefine terms and kind of have ownership over them. Diving further into descriptions, RUE is actually meaningful for a few reasons. So RUE is the participle, meaning when you bitterly regret something and wish it to be undone. And similarly, the RUE platform that I'm currently building will allow to hopefully not turn off in 1 minute. Will allow communities to take ownership over the design of civic assets and radically undo the damage caused by bureaucratic urban managerialism. We're going to find a controller to turn this off. Secondly, the RUE is also the noun for the perennial evergreen shrub, which I found out after I'd titled this project. And it's also called the common RUE. And if you guys study urban studies, it's a very interesting thing because similarly the RUE platform aims to be common, evergreen, and open for all. And third and finally, RUE is also the French word for road infrastructure or public street. And similarly, RUE aims to be open, free, and an infrastructure for radical change.
Is this working? Can I interrupt?
Yes.
If you're retrofitting to the shrub, meaning-wise, it's really interesting that they're bitter leaves and you're looking not to default to the usual conversations and also the sorts of usual solutions, but are considering how there might be limitations that you design with all of the ethical implications of that, but also probably an amount of bitter dispute around your islands of coherence. Which you try to design for. I think bitter disputes exist anywhere, and we don't ever sort of design for a sort of citywide cohesion. It's a much more complex system.
Yeah.
I'd be interested more to hear about how you might crowdsource, test, and ethically define the parameters you set for that bitter leaf. I guess I'm just following your lead.
Nice. I like it. I think when people hear things like AI and technology and entrepreneurship, again, they kind of get scared that it doesn't necessarily have a traditional focus on community engagement. When this begins to work again, look at that, magic, begins to talk about the RUE Research Lab, which is coming up next week, which you are all invited to. This is very much not an opportunity for me to say this is a perfect idea and it's done and it's finished. This is early stages, it's the basis of my thesis, also hopefully the basis of a project business that I launched after the Masters. And the RUE Research Lab, which I'll describe in a second, is an opportunity basically to be critiqued and told how all my ideas are horrible. But that's a really key part of building ideas, imagination as well. It's not just Charlie, this is, as I say, common, open, free, and I want it to be designed in the same ilk. So, thank you for the tech support for getting this up and running. Diving into the conceptual framework, academia of it all, I was exploring this notion of urban utopias, because that's what cool people do on weekends with free time. And I came up with this really basic sort of diagram, graph. Notions of urban utopia often seem complete from conception, meaning, people's idea of perfection is already done. There's no iteration or evaluation or change in that. And I wanted to alter how that is. I think utopias need to be regenerative and change. And I also thought how everyone's idea of utopia is often different and can be conflicting, and how they can actually be mutually beneficial to each other. So, civic actors, you and I, have this idea, how to make our city, our street, our neighborhood better, right? We bring that into fruition, so we actualize our imagination. Geoffrey Moore described crossing the chasm in terms of tech adoption in the city, and I wanted to include that in there. You then scale your idea. It is in the street. It influences policy, legislation, regulatory frameworks, and all of a sudden, you, in your really small way, you have a type of fractional urban utopia on your street, which you can monitor, evaluate, and iterate. Super basic, but I just thought it was quite nice to pictorially diagram what urban utopia could mean for an individual at an individual level. But then what happens when loads of people do it? So it's this idea of one person, they're moving over here. Their utopia could be having a little skate park at the end of their street, right? This person's utopia could be having a community allotment up the road. And this person's urban utopia could be having a shared bike storage with community bikes. But then what happens if that is on one street? I think that is described as a type of radical urban entrepreneurialism, and a type of urban utopia. And this is sort of very much the conceptual foundation from which RUE has developed. And it's pretty exciting because I think it can actually happen. So moving on, based on that research about a year ago, I'm now developing my thesis sort of position and frame and angle. So the title of the thesis will be Radical Urban Entrepreneurialism, RUE. You'll hear me say that a lot, so don't get bored too soon. Civic-led transformation at scale. And it aims to answer the research question of what role do emerging technologies and innovative financing play in turning vacant land into valuable community assets. And the aim of this thesis and this research is to introduce, critically analyse and further develop the RUE conceptual framework with the ultimate goal of creating a practical digital tool that can effectively facilitate community-driven urban interventions. So hopefully, guys, by this time next year, you'll all have an app that you can download and design, build and create stuff on your street, and hopefully it'll be called RUE. So there's a couple of exciting things that we're doing at the moment as part of the research and the thesis, one of which is looking into RUE-related case studies. These case studies have been selected to explore and critique RUE-related technologies in civic-led urban interventions. So, as I say, AI design tools, crowdfunding, blockchain, and innovative financing mechanisms. And I want to share some of them with you. So the first one is the Singapore's Smart Nation Initiative. So this case study delves into Singapore's Smart Nation Initiative, which basically is the sort of municipality using AI tech to enhance city services, so like urban planning, transportation, healthcare, and public services. The rhetoric and academic discourse around smart cities is rife with critique, as it should be, I think you'd all agree. And it's a really good opportunity to dive into the pros, the cons, the lessons learned, and how that can influence RUE. Secondly now this is quite a fun one actually, and I hope I don't get sued by Google. This is Toronto's Quayside project. It was a $1.3 billion project led by Google Alphabet's Sidewalk Labs. They aim to use AI across this utopia-looking type of city, but they didn't include the community or the inhabitants that were going to be there. And I think this is a really important sort of lesson in terms of top-down approach compared to actually community and citizen control. Again, lessons learned, RUE will be different, obviously better than Google. However, there are some really cool stuff that's happening with AI, especially when we apply it to the built world. So Helsinki AI chatbots, you can use them on your phone, but also there's public realm interfaces that people can go onto. And that basically acts as a triage for patients for social services, mental health, and it's an AI chatbot that triages you towards the service that you need, which is super helpful. And I've been poo-pooing Google, but they have this really cool thing. I don't know whether you guys would agree, but it's Flood Hub. What they're trying to do with Flood Hub is democratize flood forecasting. So before, floods would just happen. There was really no way of understanding when, where, and how that was happening. Google, with their sort of huge monopoly on maps, which isn't a good thing, have launched this thing called Flood Hub, which is live now in 80 countries, whereby communities around the world can see if their local water source is at risk of flooding and the measures in place to prevent that. Again, just a really nice case study of how AI is being used for good. The other case studies that we're looking at is crowdfunding. This is a really cool one actually that I want to share with you guys. So this is the Camden High Line here in London. This case study examines the successful crowdfunding campaign that transformed an abandoned elevated railway here into the vibrant urban park known as the Camden High Line. What's really interesting here is crowdfunding has been proved to be used effectively for civic-led urban interventions. You can see over 300 local people raised over £60,000 to create renders, feasibility studies, and actually get this thing built. And that's one crowdfunding page. Imagine if there was a platform that was dedicated for civic-led urban interventions. That's what RUE aims to do. Another cool case study from crowdfunding is the Thames Bath project. This has been an on and off development, but I think I'm hearing things through the grapevine that this is actually happening. The crowdfunding campaign initiated by the Thames Bath project aimed to create a floating swimming pool similar to Copenhagen. If you guys have ever been there, they have beautiful access to waterfronts, but in the River Thames, which if you swim in now, you'll probably die. But similarly to the Camden High Line project, over 1,000 people backed it, and over £140,000 was raised. Again, it's sort of showing this feasibility of community crowdfunding to make their cities, streets and neighbourhoods better in the imagination of themselves rather than from the imagination of architects and designers that may not necessarily live there. Moving on, blockchain and smart contracts. So if you guys are interested in tech, you might like this one. This is the land registry on the blockchain, which is spearheaded by Sweden. We're looking into this case study because Sweden now, all of the land registry, so who owns land, land ownership, etc., is all on the blockchain. So it's actually not owned by the Swedish government. It's kind of owned by everyone who is on it, which I think is really quite cool. It also opens up interesting discourse into trust, efficiency, security in property, but also in terms of the built world as a whole. And moving on, another one, this is actually really, really cool. So this is the CityCoin initiative that I think a couple of weeks ago got suspended, which is a bit of a shame due to market volatility and et cetera, boring. But what is cool about it is they aim to utilize blockchain technology and smart contracts for decentralized funding and governance of community-led urban projects. So basically, people would mine cryptocurrency, and using that currency was dedicated to community-led urban interventions, which is really cool. Shame it hasn't worked out, but again, it's showing that there's also this undercurrent wave of things that are related to RUE that sort of show how we're not quite there yet, but this tech is real, this tech is working. We just need to integrate it better and with community in mind. And finally, in terms of the case studies, guys, this is the innovative financing mechanisms, one of which I'm really looking into is the Green Bonds Programme, again, spearheaded by the City of Paris. This case study explores the City of Paris's issuance of green bonds to fund sustainability projects, including renewable energy, energy-efficient buildings, and green infrastructure. One of the things I didn't include here, and it's a trope of green bonds, micro-municipality bonds, social bonds, is they have a pot of money that is dedicated to community, but as I said earlier, no access to community or interventions. And what RUE aims to do is access and attract this type of public and private investment, but directly into community initiatives, again, rather than top-down approaches. Next we have the Community Investment Fund, or funds. This one is specifically looking at Bristol. Similar to the bonds, this supports community-led projects through grants, loans, and equity investment. Again, this is a really good opportunity to look into how urban interventions are funded, especially when the civic community is in control. And now the RUE Research Lab, which again you guys are all invited to. So next week, Thursday, in Dalston on Shacklewell Lane, there'll be a 3-day pop-up in collaboration with the London Festival of Architecture. I'm really pleased that we got in as part of that. It was really funny actually. I went to the opening launch party and I was the only non-architect at the London Festival of Architecture, so that was quite funny. But this aims to engage the community and other RUE potential stakeholders in contextual analysis, feasibility and knowledge exchange as well. And this is a little couple of the posters that we've sent out. So it's at the Factory, which is a really cool space, lots of different pop-up spaces, and one of them is going to be dedicated to this. The sort of headline of this is Immerse Yourself in the RUE Research Lab, a 3-day event dedicated to exploring the transformative potential of radical urban entrepreneurialism in urban interventions. Join us to engage with innovative ideas, emerging technologies and community-driven initiatives that are shaping the future of our cities. Again, 22nd, 24th of June, RUE.city on Instagram. Follow it. This is the space. It's going to look a lot cooler when we're done with it. But day one is the showcase, Thursday night, an opportunity to see the research in more detail than 20 slides, have a discussion, look at the tech that's out there, look at the case studies where these RUE-related techs are working well. Day two is an open studio. There'll be participatory workshops in which the community can write down what they want to see and in their streets and pin that where they live. Again, just sort of building capacity or maybe changing a behavior in terms of, guys, like you can actually design what your street looks like when you open your house. It can be from your imagination, not the imagination of the council or the government. And then the last day is speakers. We're still collating a roster of speakers, but maybe more of a panel discussion. And I want to have people that don't like tech and don't like AI to come as well, because it needs to be critiqued and shaped by the collective.
Shirley, on that,
and that's it.
I might suggest that in the studio you work with people to think about parameters and ethics too, and that you don't jump to designing benches and urban corners, because I think there's something about the agency and the potentially really difficult conversations you have about designing the less visible structures that everyone experiences every day in the city with the bureaucratic and managerial systems you're looking at.
Yeah.
And as you co-design a new one of those, think about how you might give space to designing limitations. But I wasn't actually interrupting to say that, it just happened. I wanted to give a little bit of time wayfinding. I want to stop at about 1:45 to make sure we have time to go to the RUE. If for those of you that are here for the 3 o'clock talk, we have Professor Monahab, who founded Beirut Urban Lab, talking about her latest research processes and the kind of latest mapping that Beirut Urban Lab are working on, but also their process over the last 10, 15 years, hosted by Louise Taylor, who's another graduating student who did a thesis that built on their data sets and considered future cities, future use for some of those in collaboration with your own sensorial mapping. So we've got some time for questions, but at 1:45, if not earlier, we're going to wrap, and then please come back at 3.
Cool. In answer to your question and provocation, one of the things I didn't mention here is, as part of the thesis, there will be a huge section dedicated to generating an ethical framework. Actually, probably the most important part of the work is that, because there's tech here that has and is being used for bad and can be used a lot better. So a large portion of my time right now is understanding, one, how to develop a robust and iterative ethical framework and how to relate it specifically to RUE, the technology that it's going to be used. An ethical framework doesn't just mean how do you use AI in an ethical way. It means, how do we talk about access? That's one of the questions that I get asked a lot. It's like, Charlie, this is going to be an app on your phone and maybe on a website as well. What about older people, people that have trauma, people that can't participate in their cities? I'm not here to say that I have all the solutions, but I'm very much here to work on it in the next couple of months.
And as you define, you might also think about the normal. We were talking before about the almost inevitable binary of good and bad that comes in when we're thinking about a civic and often a community-focused intervention. How might you think about those citywide narratives and how you challenge those? Might not be the ethical framework per se, but as you set your terms and discuss those maybe in the studio, I think you might really get wider reading and wider definitions for your fractional utopias. I'm going to hand over to all and any questions.
Hiya, thanks so much for that. It's exciting. I'm excited when you're talking about the democratizing the design process, and I'm excited to see what would come from that, because design skills, imagination skills are there on the ground, and other and different and more appropriate things might come from that, rather than involving people with more traditional or professional trainings. But I'm wondering if you think there's still a role for that in these processes, for people who have spent years thinking about space and people and learning about it, or whether it's about building control. And is there some kind? Do you think it's better to kind of leave them out of it, or if they do come in, is there some kind of matchmaking part to this to kind of help?
It is a fantastic question, and it almost shows that you've engaged with the work, because this is how my mind sounds when I'm working on it. There's 2 ways to answer your question. One is with a little bit of a case study. Adobe has created Firefly, which is a generative fill AI. And what that allows people to do is, using an image, highlight a section of that image and type in what they want to see. And without any design application, if you, let's say, have a photo of a building, you highlight the rooftop and you say rooftop garden, it will generate a really good architecturally sound render of that, which sort of shows how anyone, basically, if they can type rooftop garden, can create an architecturally sound render. In terms of your question and provocation about connection and the role of the urban practitioner in community-led initiatives, I think we're talking about capacity here, especially from a community perspective. A lot of people have full-time jobs and other responsibilities, some of which won't be, I want to create a really cool park bench at the end of my street. So there is the benefit of the architect, the engineer, the designer to be part of this. When we're looking at designing the actual RUE platform, we're looking at an Airbnb-esque marketplace in which local architects, designers, engineers will be connected to local projects. There's a lot of architecture studios that if there is a community member that has an architecturally sound render, a fund that is all community-led, they would want to be part of that project and do it happily. So yes.
So you're co-producing the brief. That render of a generic garden wouldn't be a design. It would probably have to be quite clear that this is something around getting agreement from multiple voices around this brief, around its potential climactic impact, its accessibility level.
Yeah.
And then there's a moment of where probably you code in the freezing in time of a brief, because it'd be really iterative, at which point I imagine then there's a mini design competition coded in, which then gets interesting in how you use the word design, because you'll probably get the same question quite a lot. Also around generated images and
ownership
and the role of design.
Off the back of that, there's a couple of things. So what we're looking at in terms of how someone would use the RUE app is they would take a photo of a vacant space on their street, take a photo, and using AI would type in or voice first what they want to see. It will create that render. What happens though if there's 3 ideas for the same space? We're looking at gamification. That's one of the solutions in terms of, let's say I want to create a skate park, my neighbour wants to create a community allotment, and my other neighbour wants to create a community bike share, all in one space. But what happens then? There is a discussion to be had around how much is crowdfunded and how much capacity those people have. There's also a role of RUE as intermediary and as marketplace to see how those 3 ideas can be mutually beneficial together. Again, this is not a fully formed solution, but I'm thinking about how ideas compete for space, especially if they're all neighbours, and what role RUE has in picking which one wins.
Or potentially how, could RUE play a role in supporting the facilitation of conversations around it? I don't know, 'cause that's an opportunity for connection as well, is making decisions together about which one and why. And it's tricky and it's messy, and maybe outsiders shouldn't be coming in and doing it, but yeah, I guess just another question.
Conflict is great. I think conflict is important. One of the things that again we're looking at is the crowdfunding feature element will almost be like a community forum as well, right? Yes, you have the ability to donate 5, 10, 20 pounds, 10p, whatever you want to your neighbour's project, but you also have the ability to comment, critique, discuss what you want to see in that space. And that's why the AI generated render is not complete. Again, it's monitored, evaluated, changed based on the imagination and voice of the community. So yes, not there yet, but very much as part of the design process.
Thank you. It's really amazing work and it's really exciting. Looking forward to seeing what happens next.
Thank you.
I just had a question about the blockchain contracts section and whether it was sort of essential or whether it was a sort of potentially optional side to what you're proposing. And then there's a second question which was about the physicality of immediate space in conjunction with the application aspect, which I think is great, and it's going to be really important in terms of democratizing, but I wondered whether you thought about in the in-person aspects of the decisions and conversations around public space.
It's a really good question, and I don't want to forget your first one, so let me answer the second one first. Again, this is a digitally native solution, right? But when we're having discussions about how this is going to look physically in the street, there's a couple of things. So if you walk past a planning notice currently, you know, the council is so funny, they print out about 20 sheets and laminate it and maybe put a QR code. That's a physical interface with the community. There's other, and it's dreadful, like who is going to stop and read all that planning notice stuff on the street is torrid. But there are really cool things, like there's a company called Hello Lamppost, QR code based, and also I think just a press button where it shares what's happening around you, and it allows the community member to press a button and speak into the lamppost about what they want to see in that area. So we're looking at other dashboard physical interfaces that will allow the community, without a mobile phone, without a computer, just to go up to a vacant space that maybe has, I don't know, a bright neon billboard with a button push where they can where they can speak in what they want to see in that space. That is a potential idea, but still in development. Your first question was about the blockchain smart contracts. I'm 23 years old, and I've, very much digital nomad, digital native rather, and have been growing up in this world of blockchain and Web 3.0. I look at cryptocurrency a lot, and there's a really exciting democratization of money with things like Bitcoin, Ethereum. What happens there is basically there's no top-down ownership over money. There's no centralized process. And I thought, well, what happens then if we do the same thing that they've done with Bitcoin and Ethereum, but with the built world and how we design and build things, when there's no centralized decision maker, there's equal ownership across stakeholders, which crazily hasn't happened yet. And that's what RUE aims to do. And the only way to do that, you can't rely on a handshake and a friendly smile. It has to be an immutable blockchain smart contract for that to work. Final thing on that question is all of this technology already exists. So RUE 0.0, hopefully there'll be a RUE 0.1 billion. But the first iteration will be APIs of existing tech. So the voiced first and text to image AI already exists. The crowdfunding already exists, the blockchain already exists, and green bonds already exist. What then happens if we can take APIs and just put that into a community-friendly user face? That is RUE. We've done it already. And then things will develop. But it's a great question, and we're working on it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you guys.